And good afternoon again. It's good to be back with you. Really appreciate you joining us again for Extension Engagement Week here at the University of Missouri. Obviously, our partners at UMKC, University of Missouri St. Louis, Missouri S&T, and here at MU in Columbia have been a part of this. Our faculty and staff throughout the state and MU Extension, so many partners with so many different groups that we now partner with. In particular this week as we think about health and well-being and really trying to move those indicators that we talked about earlier today and trying to figure out how with our partners can we begin to move Missouri's health to a better place. You know, as you think about health and all the things we've been through with COVID this year and all the things we've learned in terms of telehealth, telemedicine, you heard some great conversations earlier today about that. You heard us talk about how to work with community and how, whether in the rural setting or the urban setting, that it's really important that we get to know our community partners and then bring them with us. And a little later today, you can be hearing from a speaker that talks about bringing people with us. So that certainly fits this same context of what we're about in terms of trying to build community, ensure that Missourians are taken care of, and the university's space in that and what that means. So what I'm pleased with today is to have someone join me here on set. We're going to talk for a couple of minutes. Many folks here, certainly the Columbia area and certainly throughout Missouri, know Robin Whitaker. Robin is a great supporter of the university. Recently joined the Board of Curators. Actually, I guess in some ways, Robin's one of my bosses now. But I want to say personally that when I first came to the University of Missouri as Vice Chancellor, one of the things that happens is they introduce you to a lot of people and you get to know a lot of folks. And Robin was one of those people that really, I think what I was trying to do and what I was saying resonated, that we need to be in service to the people of the state. We need to figure out how we can bring people together to really build a stronger Missouri. So I'm really glad today to have Robin Whitaker. She's a businesswoman, very successful here in not only mid-Missouri but throughout the state, well-known, connected, a philanthropist in her own right. Wonderful family and great tradition. Obviously a Mizzou grad. She does bring that and unapologetic. But Robin, I'm really glad to have you with me today.
Thank you. Honored to be here. And, you know, I think I've told you the story. I mean, Extension's personal to us. So it's important for me to be part of Extension and Engagement Week. And we've had such a great October. This is really the cherry on the top for me to be able to be with you all today. Well,
I know you sit on the board, and I know yesterday was a really important day. We saw something, I felt like I was part of history yesterday. You know, we think about Jesse Hall. We think about sort of the iconic columns here. I think yesterday another iconic piece of the puzzle came together with Next Gen. As you think about that, where do you see that going? Why is the board interested in seeing those kind of investments?
You know, I think when one of the things I always thought about when I came on the board, and I think it's a good reason why we built Next Gen, is that we are here to serve our citizens. We're here to serve the state, and we're here to deliver the university mission, of which obviously outreach is a big piece, which is extension and engagement. But Next Gen gives us that opportunity to serve the health of Missourians. And, you know, that sounds broad, but it's also highly personal to our citizens. And I think we take that seriously. And what an amazing accomplishment for the University of Missouri to not only impact Missourians, but have the opportunity to impact the region, possibly the country and the world as we look for solutions and transform healthcare. So I think it's an exciting day. In my mind, October 19, 2021 goes down as one of the key dates in the history of the University of Missouri.
Well, there's no doubt. And one of the things we were talking about this before we came on was the lineup of people we had here. You know, you had Senator Blunt, obviously well-known, iconic in this state, great public servant, served in so many different roles over the years. But then we had Francis Collins with us yesterday, NIH director, served 3 different presidents. And we were talking about what we saw in him. And as we think about that, tell me, what did you see in Francis Collins yesterday?
I just thought I saw a scientist, but I think we have a tendency to think of scientists in white coats and you kind of set them aside and they're in a lab. And I saw this man who embraces his faith, embraces science, who's figured out how to deal in the political world, how he's figured out, I mean, the NIH funding changed dramatically under him because he knew how to make the case. So he never lost sight of his patients and continued to serve in that role, but also transitioned himself into a key spokesman worldwide when you think about the genomics project, that he oversaw for a decade. I mean, just a remarkable American. I guess that's what I walked out thinking. I was so proud that I got to hear him speak in person.
You talk about remarkable Americans. We're getting ready to bring on another remarkable American, a leader, someone that obviously the University of Missouri knows well. And what we're going to ask Robin to do now is to step into that space and introduce our next speaker, someone that I know you're going to enjoy hearing from, that I've had the pleasure of meeting over the time that I've been here at the University of Missouri. So Robin, I'm going to kick it over to you to make our introduction.
Fantastic. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Stewart. Good afternoon. I'm Robin Whitaker, as Marshall Stewart said, a proud Mizzou grad, entrepreneur, and marketer. And I also have the honor of serving as a curator for the University of Missouri. Like all of you and our outstanding speaker today, we are committed to the success of our premier land-grant university, to the education of the next generation of leaders, and to serving the people of Missouri. We have all faced some daunting challenges these past 2 years, and I know that in my family business, we've tried to manage those challenges with concern, not only for business achievement, but also to serve and nurture our families, colleagues, and customers. Fortunately, I attended a talk by David Novak 2 years ago that gave me both inspiration and tools for moving forward. David and his family endowed the Novak Leadership Institute at the University of Missouri with a gift of almost $22 million. He grew up traveling around the country with his family, living in trailer parks. He began that leadership journey at Mizzou, where he took his first class in advertising at the School of Journalism. It was there he found his passion in life, the ability to think like a marketer, to empathize with others, and to take people with him. These ideas helped him develop his leadership philosophy. He and his family generously support not only the Novak Leadership Institute, but their philanthropy extends beyond MU, funding a pediatric hospital, diabetes treatment programs, food banks, diversity initiatives, support for military spouses and children, early childhood education, and leadership programs for students from elementary school through high school. Of all the experts whose books I have read, as well as those I've heard speak, David's tenets for leadership struck me as the most relatable, with practical advice I could put into practice right away. In fact, I was so inspired that his ideas became a cornerstone of my own daily leadership practices. What is David's formula for dramatically increasing organizational effectiveness and fostering the well-being of others? Today, he reveals the secret sauce of people-first leadership and how gaining insights into those we lead can power our success. Warren Buffett said, "David Novak is the best at leadership, whether teaching it or practicing it." And about David's new book, Take Charge of You, Deepak Chopra, renowned expert in self-care and self-development, said the book will teach you everything, not only about the peak performance, but also about peak living. Some of David's advice may surprise you. As co-founder and CEO of Yum Brands, which includes Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC, he showed how thinking like a marketer helps leaders understand the needs and perspectives not only of customers, but also of those they lead. What emerges are 4 key principles that have stood the test of time and propelled David to extraordinary heights. David is recognized as a top CEO and the creator of a win-together culture in one of the world's largest restaurant chains. He shows us how these 4 key principles, respect, empathy, recognition, and communication, foster remarkable accomplishments. Even better, they engender a culture where the experience of work brings a sense of purpose and joy. I'm delighted to introduce David Novak.
Well, thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say all those good things about me. You know, it's an honor to have the privilege to speak to all of you today. You know, as Robin said, I graduated from the University of Missouri in 1974. My wife did the same. We met at Mizzou, and Mizzou has opened up so many doors for us as a couple and as a family, and we're so grateful to be able to give back. And you know, I can tell you that I have had a blast working at the University of Missouri with Margaret Duffy and her team at the Novak Leadership Institute. And I think we're really doing great things as we try to make the world a better place by developing better leaders. You know, our thinking is that we want the University of Missouri to be the best practice university, where other universities will come to us and figure out, you know, how to help the students to become the best possible leaders they can be. And I think we're making some tremendous progress because of Margaret and her team's great efforts. You know, Robin asked me to speak on how to foster well-being, especially in these uncertain times. And you might ask, you know, why is this such an important topic for us? Well, just consider these facts. 93% of employees say they would leave their job that they actually like to go to a more empathetic organization. Only 32% of employees are engaged at work. 51% say they're not engaged at all. And I can't even believe this. I don't even know how you do it, but 17% say they're actively disengaged. I don't know how you could actually do that, but there are 17% of the people out there who are actively disengaged at work. And 67% of employees say that they're burnt out at work. So no wonder they're not getting a whole lot of joy when they go to work. And then 82% say they are not even recognized by their supervisor for what they do. So how do we turn this sad situation around and foster well-being, especially in times like these? And let's start by just defining what we mean by well-being. It's a person's physical and mental health at work and at home, and it's being able to bring your whole self to work with joy and appreciation. So how do we do it? How do we get after this? Well, when I really started to think about this and get ready for this talk with you, I actually came to the conclusion that the solutions that we need to improve the well-being of so many people in our world are actually timeless. In fact, I'd venture to say that what will work today worked 25 years ago, and the same solutions will work 25 years from now. Let me tell you a little story. When PepsiCo, which was a company I used to work for, decided to spin off its restaurants, and at that time it was Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. And I happened to be running KFC and Pizza Hut at the time in 1997. We were spun off, and we were given the charge of basically doing a do-over of these three brands. They had been mismanaged, and the performance was very poor, and we really needed to turn around the results. And that's why we were being spun off from PepsiCo. We were seen as a drag on PepsiCo's earnings, and people thought we could actually do better if we were on our own, because we'd have to get better at running our restaurant company. So, when we started as a company, I took my team out and I said, look, we really want to build a great company here. So let's go visit the best companies in the United States that are building tremendous businesses. So we went out and we visited Home Depot, Southwest Airlines, Target. We visited Walmart. We visited Coca-Cola Company. We visited General Electric, which was the highest valued company in the world at that point in time. And we went out to find out what their secret sauce was, to use Robin's phrase. And we codified the big things that they were doing. And because we wanted to do those same things as we were going to try to build our company. But the number one thing that everybody talked about that was the key to all of these great companies that got consistent results year in and year out was they all said that they had this tremendous culture where they valued their people came first, then you satisfy customers, then you make money. And that they really created cultures, which I don't never like that word culture. It sounds too much like a germ to me, but it means a work environment. They created these work environments where people actually felt valued for what they did and felt appreciated for what they do, and that they created that work environment where everyone counts. And that was the single biggest thing that they saw really drove their results. And, now I have started a new company. It's called David Novak Leadership. We do digital training programs, and I host a podcast called How Leaders Lead with David Novak. And I interview the top CEOs in the country and top sports leaders, people like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase, to Tony Hsiu at DoorDash, to Evan Spiegel at Snap, all kinds of different CEOs, and sports leaders like Tom Brady and Larry Fitzgerald, and just people who are really good at what they do. And they all talk about the importance of building teams where everyone counts and they feel valued, and that the work environment is the most important thing that they need to focus on to make sure that they get results. And I believe that creating a work environment, a team environment, a coaching environment where every person is valued for who they are and what they do is the essential for creating employee well-being. Based on everything that I've observed and all the research that I've read, I think it boils down to 4 key elements. And Robin touched on them: respect, empathy, recognition, and communication. And what I'd like to do is give you my take on each one of these. Respect means believing in all people, trusting in positive intentions, and knowing that everyone wants to make a difference. I truly believe that people don't wake up every day to be a part of something mediocre. They want to be a part of something great. So with your team, you want to create a purpose, a noble cause for the work that you do. So many of you are educators, on this call. So many of you are making great things happen in healthcare. You are doing phenomenal work. And what you have to do, I believe, is let the people that are on your teams know that the work you're doing is more than just getting a paycheck. You're helping others. You're making a difference in the world. And having this noble cause, I think, gives people a sense that they're a part of something special. And that's what people want. You just don't want to go to work every day and do your job. You want to go to work every day and be a part of making the world a better place and feeling that you've got a meaningful part. And you're not only meaningful at, you're appreciated for doing what you do. And what I'm doing right now with David Novak Leadership and the new company that we've created is we're focused on making the world a better place by developing better leaders. That's why I couldn't wait to get up today and to talk to you, because I feel like this purpose keeps me going and keeps our team going. And that's what we want to do to really impact this world. But I think having that noble cause gives you much more to grasp, much more to hang on to as you go to work. You just don't want to come to work and have your team and in yourself, just coming in to put in the time. You want to be putting in the time to make a difference and know that what you do really matters. When I think of respect, I always think of my mom and dad. My dad was a government surveyor. We actually we had a surveying group of about 15 families, and we traveled around as he surveyed the longitude and latitude points in small town America. I'm the only person who's ever lived in Dodge City, Kansas twice. But I lived in all these little small towns, and we lived in 23 states by the time I was in 7th grade. But my dad had a high school education, worked his way up to where he got a permanent job in Kansas City, ended up going to Washington, D.C., and moved as high up as he could in the government with a high school education. Everybody else was an engineer. My mom, she was an Avon lady in the neighborhood. We needed to have 2 people as a dual income family. Then she went on to be a bookkeeper, and then self-taught her all the accounting she needed to do to become the controller for a paint company. And she did this with a high school education. And when I think about my mom and dad, they both grown up. My mom grew up in Meadville, Missouri. My dad grew up in Haddam, Kansas. They worked their way up and did everything they could. They taught me the value of working hard. Believe me, both of them are as smart, if not smarter than me. But one thing they didn't have is they didn't have the opportunity to go to college, go to the University of Missouri. They didn't have the opportunity to have the mentors I had once I got into the workplace. And they didn't have, I have had nothing to stop me. I've had continuous support, including theirs. But one of the things that my mom and dad taught me is that it doesn't matter what level you are in the world, you can be smart. You can make a difference. You can care about what you do. And my mom and dad taught me that. And I gained enormous respect for the power that everybody has to really, do their best and make a difference, and the power of pursuit of the American dream. And so when I would go out in our restaurants, one of the things I always did is I always visited the front line. I always like to go out in the restaurants and talk to people and ask them, what's going on? What's working, what's not working. Believe me, I would go out and I would see my mother. I would see my dad. I would see them, when I was talking to restaurant managers, people just like them offering me these great ideas. And the only reason why they hadn't gone any further than where they were going, and they probably have gone a lot further since, is that they maybe didn't have all the opportunities that I had, but they were definitely smart, and they were definitely caring, and they definitely were putting the time in, and they definitely deserved respect. So I think the fact that I had this humble beginning, and I always tell people I didn't succeed in spite of my upbringing, I succeeded because of it. I think it gave me a sense of respecting everyone and the value that they can bring to work. Now, one of the important things to do if you want to show respect is ask people for their ideas. And when I went out and talked to our restaurant managers and team members, I asked them for their ideas. And believe me, they gave them to me. And I got so many good ideas that I otherwise would have never happened. How we could improve our drive-through speeds. The fact that, our napkins were so thin that people had to pick up 50 of them to make one good napkin. So we improved our napkins. I mean, I could go on and on with the things that I learned from people who were closest to our customers. And believe me, the most powerful way to motivate someone is to listen to them. And my favorite question, and this is one I think you should use if you have people working with you, or if you want to learn from other people about how you're doing, is ask them, what would you do if you were me? Now, most times when you ask somebody that question, they're going to say, oh, especially if you're the head coach or they work for you, they're going to say, oh, you're terrific, David. Well, ask them again. And they'll say, well, yeah, you're really terrific. Well, ask them the third time, and they're going to say, well, David, you're terrific, but maybe you might want to do this and this and this. But the point that I'm making is if you really want to get input, you really want to get feedback, and you really want to make people feel valued, ask them for their input and keep asking until you get it, because people will be reluctant to give you the feedback you need to grow. And also the business or whatever your enterprise that you're working on or project that you're working on needs to have the feedback on so that you can truly flourish. Now, respect also means believing in all people. And I want to emphasize all, because that means recognizing the power of diversity and inclusion. And I want to share two stories with you. When I was president of KFC, I used to go out in the field and I was always looking for talent. Well, I ran into this guy named Alwyn Lewis. He was a Black leader who was doing fantastic work, but he hadn't really grown in the company. So I elevated him, put him in bigger jobs. He ultimately became the chief operating officer for KFC, for Yum, actually. And he did a phenomenal job. But what was really amazing to me is that all of a sudden we started surfacing all these Black leaders. They were in the company, but they weren't growing. But Alwyn saw them and saw their opportunities and basically lifted them up and gave them more opportunities, and our operations improved. Now, Alwyn went on to be the CEO of Sears and Kmart, which I wouldn't wish on anybody. Then he became the CEO of Potbelly. But the fact of the matter is that his view, his perspective allowed our team to get a lot better, and we discovered a lot more talent and diverse talent because of him. Now, another story I want to talk about is Ann Byerline. Now, Ann Byerline came up in our company in the human resources group, and she became our chief people officer. One day she says, David, I want you to come down and see what we're working on here. And she took me downstairs and she showed me the plans for our child care center. We were one of the first companies to offer childcare centers at our restaurant support centers. And this was because Ann had that in her DNA. She knew what it was like to be a working mother. She knew how important it was to provide the childcare there. I had an appreciation for that, but it wasn't top of mind. It wasn't on my radar screen like it was hers. She brought in a different perspective, and she made our company better, and she made the work environment better for the working women and working parents, that had children. And I think that kind of diversity and those different thoughts really help a team get better and really help you create a much better work environment. I always believe that you want to build teams that make you whole-brained. You've heard about people being right-brained and left-brained. Well, you want to get the different perspectives on your team that make you whole-brained, so that you can always get to the best decision. And I always tell everybody, it's like, you want to put all the people that you work with on your team, put them in a blender, turn it on, and create this super milkshake, because you've got everything that you need, all the skills you need to get to the very best decisions. So it's very important to respect the fact that everybody brings something different to the table. Everybody can make a difference on your team, no matter what level they happen to be. In fact, the best advice I ever got, and it came from a guy who was by the name of Jack Byerline. And when I was young, coming up, I had more responsibility than I probably should have had. And I had a pretty mousy mustache. And, they sent me to this guy to try to learn how I could look like I was more mature, because I was working with people that were 10, 15 years older than me. And one of the things that Jack told me that I'll never forget, he said, David, he said, you don't look up, don't look down, always look straight ahead when you're working with people. And I love that. Don't look up. You want to respect people because they have more experience than you, and maybe they have a higher title. You respect them for that, but they're not better than you. Don't look down because you're not better than anybody else. Just look straight ahead and treat everybody equal and treat everybody with this respect that they deserve. And I think that's great advice. So respect, it's an essential element for any kind of well-being that you want to have within your team. Next, let's talk about empathy. At the Novak Leadership Institute, the basic tenet that we teach is that if you're going to take people with you, and I wrote a book on this called Taking People With You, and it's based on the approach that I use, to take people with you and take people with me and get people aligned so that you can get results. But the approach basically stems from the fact that you need to think about your people and understand your people just like a marketer understands the customer. You need to put yourself in the heads of the people that you work with and understand how they're thinking. And in marketing, I always ask this question: what perception, habits, and beliefs do you have to change, build, or reinforce to grow the business? Now, when I start a big change initiative, or when I'm trying to take my team with me to get something done, I ask myself the same question: what perception, what habits, what beliefs do I have to change, build, or reinforce to take people with me? And believe me, when you get that answer, then you can go forward and break down the barriers that are out there in terms of getting whatever you want to have done. Let me give you a couple examples here of why you need to know how people are thinking. I would bet if I ask how many of you are working on things that have been tried before, I bet almost 25% of you would raise your hand. I can't see you, but I would bet a lot of people are working on things that people have tried to get done before. And you probably got people working on it with you. And I bet you, what are people thinking? They're thinking, well, what's going to be different this time? We've already tried this. How are we going to go about this? Well, if that's what people are thinking, you need to sit down and say, hey, listen, I know, I've talked to you. I know what you're thinking. This is a project we tried before. What are we going to do to make it different this time so that we successfully go forward? Now, you can tell them what you're going to do differently as a leader. And just as importantly, they can tell you, what they would do and to make this happen. And I guarantee you'll have a much better chance of getting better results. A lot of you, I also would expect, might be in new positions. And you might be in positions where the leadership has changed more than once. I know the leadership has changed more than once quite frequently at the University of Missouri. So the first thing that the first question that you might have is, as if you're working for the new leader on the block is, oh, here we go again. How's it going to be different? Well, if you're the leader in a situation like that, you got to let people know that you understand why they might feel this way and why it's going to be different, and how together we're going to be able to take this business and take this university or take whatever you're working on to the next level. Empathy is so critical. It's a critical skill for the 21st century. Jeff Colvin, who's the senior writer for Fortune magazine, I did a podcast with him. He wrote a book called Humans Are Underrated. And it was a book on how are humans going to compete in this world of computers where AI and machine learning is taking over. And he said that the key traits for the best leaders in the 21st century, it's going to be empathy and collaboration, because computers can't do those things. Computers can't get inside of the heads of how people are thinking. Computers can't bring people together and collaborate so 1 + 1 = 3. That's what you can do. And when you do that, showing that kind of empathy, getting people involved, that creates well-being. That creates a place that, hey, I want to be a part of. Because I can tell you one thing, if you have no involvement in something, you're going to have no commitment. Now, empathy also means being there when times are tough. When I was running Yum Brands in our 3rd year, our distribution company, the company that basically delivered the food to our restaurants, went bankrupt. Now, that's a big problem when you've got 22,000 restaurants at the time needing food and your distributor's gone bankrupt. And I remember John Weinberg, who was on our board. He was a great director, a very wise man. He was the head of Goldman Sachs, the top investment company in the world. He came up to me and said, David, I want you to know something. I know this is a tough time. You're going to get through this. Just stay positive. We have your back. We know this is going to be challenging, but we're with you. And if there's anything I can do for you, okay, you just let me know. Man, knowing that he had my back, knowing that the board was empathetic with the situation that I was in, not blaming me, man, I can tell you that only freed me up to be able to do the job I needed to do, to get us out of the ditch and back where we needed to go. And I think this leads me to a very important thing. Empathy also means recognizing that failure is a part of life. There's nobody I know that has truly lived life and pursued work that hasn't failed at something. But the difference is the people that fail, they don't look at it as failure. They look at it as learning. They look at it as a learning experience. Yeah, you don't want those things to happen, and you certainly don't want the same thing to happen twice. But boy, you have such an incredible opportunity to learn from the mistakes that you make in your career. And people love you as a leader to talk about those mistakes, because it shows that you're empathetic to the processes that they're going through and the fact that they might make a mistake. And you want people to be freed up so that they can perform at their highest level. And that's why I always tell people about my Crystal Pepsi story. I actually created Crystal Pepsi, which was the top product the year before I introduced it nationally with my team. It was written up as this great idea, and then it became the biggest bomb in the history of beverage marketing. And that was my job. And that was my idea. And the reason why it failed is I just didn't get enough people involved along the way in the whole process. And that was one of the reasons why it failed, probably the biggest reason why it failed. And that learning was something that I always shared with people, because I wanted them to know, you got to get that input up front on whatever you do if you're truly going to be successful. And, I do these podcasts, as I mentioned earlier. I love one I did recently with Shantanu Narayan, who's the CEO of Adobe. I tried to get him to talk about his epic failure. He wouldn't do it. Not because he didn't have them. He just hated the word failure. He said, we don't use the word failure around here. We use the word experience. Everything gives you experience, and a chance and a choice of learning from it. And I think that he's got it right. He's got it right. So empathy is something that I think creates well-being for employees, frees them up to perform, and knowing that you know what they're thinking allows you to address the issues that need to be addressed so that you can have success. Now, the third element is what I believe is the most powerful tool a leader can use, and that's recognition. I actually wrote a book on this called Oh Great One, a little story about the awesome power of recognition. And I had a lightning rod moment in my career. As I mentioned, I told you I like to go out in the field and to talk to people and find out what's working, what's not working. Well, I became the chief operating officer for Pepsi-Cola Company. And so I would go out and I would have roundtables. and I would meet with people in the warehouses and our bottling plants and ask them what was working, what wasn't working. And so I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm talking to a group of route salespeople about merchandising. I said, tell me about merchandising. What are you learning? And everybody started raving about this guy named Bob. They said, oh, Bob is the best merchandiser I've ever seen. He's incredible. He taught me more in 4 hours than I learned my first 3 years here. Oh, yeah, you should see Bob with customers. He's great. He knows how to go in, make the store look great, make our products look great, get the POP up, get the facings just perfect. He's the absolute best. And I look across the table and he's crying. And I said, Bob, why in the world are you crying? These people are heaping all this praise on you. And he said, well, David, I've been in this company for 47 years and I'm retiring in 2 weeks. And I didn't know that people felt this way about me. And that hit me in the gut. Okay. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, the last thing I want is to have someone as good as Bob not feeling appreciated in any team that I work with. And so I made it my goal at that point in time that I was going to make recognition the number one value that I would try to use to drive performance and appreciate performance going forward. So one of the things that happened shortly thereafter is I got the chance to become a president of the PepsiCo division, and it was KFC. Now, when I got this promotion, I got more calls of condolences than congratulations because KFC was the graveyard for executives. Everybody who went there ended up getting fired. They hadn't made their business plan in the last 8 years, which is not good when you're a part of PepsiCo, not good when you're part of anything. And it was just a place where you weren't supposed to succeed. The franchisees hated the company hated the franchisees. So I went in there and said, look, I'm going to use recognition to start turning this place around. So I actually came up with a recognition award, and it's this rubber chicken. And I would go out, and wherever I saw people doing things that I knew drive our business, I would give them this rubber chicken. I'd autograph it, write it, take a picture of them, tell them they could throw the picture in the trash if they want to when they get it. But I'm going to put their picture and hang it in my office, okay? And I gave them $100 because you couldn't eat a floppy chicken. And, people started crying when they got this little silly rubber chicken. But I started recognizing people when they were doing the things that I knew would get us to great performance, focusing on our customers, positive energy, being accountable. We had our values. So I started recognizing those things. And guess what? All of a sudden, people who had never really contributed, the franchisees that hated us, started working with us. We changed the whole environment around. We came up with new products, and we turned the business around. The finance people will tell you all the new products that we developed were the reason why the business was turned around. I always said it was a triumph of human spirit because all of a sudden we were working together. And then, I actually got promoted. Okay. And so I went to Pizza Hut too, and I started giving away these cheese heads. And I not only had all these fun awards, but everybody that worked for me had fun awards. And it just spread and it took off and it created a fun environment. And we started celebrating our achievements, celebrating our first downs, and we started doing extremely well today. Now, why does recognition work so well? Well, I had the great pleasure to spend some time with the late Colin Powell, who just passed away, former Secretary of State, a great leader. He actually worked in a Pepsi bottling plant, and he was talking to me about his experience when he worked there in the summers as a summer job. He used to get out the mop, okay, and clean all the syrup off the floor. And he said at the end of the year, the foreman came up to him at the end of the summer and said, son, I've been watching you every day. And when you leave, those floors are spick and span. You've done a great job. Thank you very much. And Colin Powell said, that's when I knew the power of recognition was something special because it shows that someone's watching. When you recognize people that work for you, when they do a good job, it shows that you're watching. It shows that they count. It shows that what they're doing really matters. And I would say make it purposeful. So if you have a team, I would ask you, what are the traits that you want to have happen on your team? What's going to get great performance? Do you want to have innovation? Do you want to have people meet their deadlines? Do Do you want to do it on budget? Do you want them focused on the students? What are the characteristics? What are the traits that you know that if you see more of it, you're going to have better performance? Well, as a leader and as a team member, those are the characteristics. Those are the traits that you need to recognize. Now, why is that? Because people will do more of what you recognize. You know, I did a podcast with Frank Blake at Home Depot. He says, you know, it was amazing, David. You know, I visited your company, learned what you were doing on recognition, started doing the same thing at Home Depot. And you know what? It was amazing. Once I started recognizing people for being customer focused, guess what happened? We got more customer focused. When I started recognizing them for productivity initiatives, guess what happened? We started being more cost efficient. He started getting more of what he was looking for. And that's what recognition does. You know, a lot of people think recognition is the soft stuff. Well, I think it's the soft stuff that drives hard results. You know, there's two reasons why people leave companies, okay? This has been quantified over and over again. Number one, they don't feel appreciated. Number two, they don't get along with their boss. That's why I don't believe in bosses. I believe in coaches, okay? But let me tell you something. If you can keep your people and you can keep the best talent, you're going to get better results. That's hard stuff. And I'll also tell you, I'll show you this little article. This was written by Fortune magazine on our company. And it said, great job. And right here it says, or how Yum Brands uses recognitions to build teams and get results. You know, during my tenure, we went from 20,000 restaurants to 45,000 restaurants. Our stock went up 8 times. Okay. And we recognized the heck out of people all around the world. And it was the number one thing that people bragged about in terms of working at Yum Brands. And it was the thing that I believe drove all of our success. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about communication. And let me rephrase that. Communication, communication, communication. You know, I went to Walmart, as I mentioned earlier. I went to them more than once because they're such a great company I wanted to learn from. But Sam Walton had a phrase that I wrote down the minute I saw it and the minute I heard about it, and I use it all the time. The more you know, the more you care. In fact, Sam Walton was such a visionary because he created satellite television for Walmart when they kept growing so many stores that he couldn't get to all of them. But he would go on satellite television, and basically he created the internet and retail before there was the internet. And he would say, okay, I want this display up here by, this way and that way. And he said, will you do it? So help me, Sam. They'd all raise their hands and go, so help me, Sam. And, he made that big company. It was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, smaller because he was communicating with them on a one-on-one basis. This guy was a genius at communication. So you need to think about how to communicate effectively. And I would say you got to build it into your process. Number one, make it regular. Sam Walton, he not only had his satellite television that he used all the time, but he had a weekly meeting for all the employees every Saturday morning. I attended those. They are amazing. And they talk about all the things that are going on that are good, the things that aren't so good, and how the business is performing. And it's interesting, people at all levels know that they really matter. In fact, if you go to Walmart, they had this phrase up there that says, today's stock price is X, tomorrow's stock price is up to you. Because why? You count. And that's what they communicated all the time. So you want to make your communication with your team regular too, at least once a week. And I would say you might not have satellite television, but you can wander around and you can notice what people are doing and communicate with them and ask if they have any questions. Second thing is make sure your communication is clear. Take the time to simplify. Abe Lincoln, I love this phrase. He said, I would have had time to write you a shorter letter. If I'd had time, I would have written you a shorter letter. Okay? Because he knew it takes time to synthesize, to boil things down, to simplify. And I think as a leader, you need to take that time so it's simple, it's clear, it's direct, and people get it the first time. The third thing in communication is be transparent, be open, be vulnerable. Talk about your struggles. One thing I've learned is people don't want to hear about how great you are and all the wonderful things that you've done. Most of the time, if you've done them, they know it, okay? What they want to hear is your struggles along the way. That's why people always love my stories about Crystal Pepsi, how I really messed that one up, how when I was at Pizza Hut, I had bought 9 million Back to the Future 2 sunglasses and tried to sell them in December with the biggest snow season in the history of the world. I got a list that's so long you wouldn't believe it, but people love hearing those. And the main thing is I learn from all those things, and I talk about the learnings, and that gives people the freedom to perform and try new things and know that, hey, they might fail too. The next thing, number 4, is make your communication two-way. Trust me, your way is not the highway. Okay, that is a fact I can absolutely guarantee you. So you want to genuinely pursue dialogues with your people. Be humble and be secure enough to open yourself up to ask them for advice and admit that you don't know something. The great thing about humility is that it says, I need you. The smartest people in the room, they end up being the dumbest people in the room. The humble people, the people that are humble, they show people that they need them to be able to be the best that they can be. And remember that. I mean, it's such a powerful thing. Open yourself up, be vulnerable. It's why authenticity is such an important trait for every leader today, is that you can't fake who you are. Show who you are and see what happens. Now, one more thing on communication. Tell stories. Margaret Duffy told me about some research recently that's been done that when people listen to stories together, their hearts actually synchronize. You remember stories. You don't remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't remember just a regurgitation of the facts. Tell stories to bring the facts to life. So the bottom line here is you want to create a work environment where everyone counts. You want to show your people respect. You want to be empathetic. You want to recognize people, show them that you value them, and then you want to communicate. And I'd like to close by making a final point about well-being, and that's your own well-being. You got to make your own development a top priority, because the better you get, the more you can help others. You got to make sure you stay in shape. When you get out of shape, you feel terrible. It's bad for you. Trust me, I know. I worked at Yum Brands. Colonel Sanders went out and ate one chicken wing in every restaurant he visited. I'd go to 9 or 10 a day. I wanted to be like Colonel Sanders. I was eating 10 pieces of chicken every day. And I went from like 195 to 235 pounds. And I had to get my act together or I wasn't going to be around. Okay. But I had to make that commitment to stay in shape. And once I got in better shape, I had a lot higher energy. And then you got to keep your mood elevator high. I really try to do this every day. When I wake up in the morning, I do gratitudes. I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, because I've learned that there's such a thing as a mood elevator. You make your worst decisions when you're angry and resentful, which is the bottom of the mood elevator. You make your best decisions at the top of the mood elevator when you're grateful. So I would always try to go to work every day, at least in the curious and interested state, okay, where I was in the learning mode, and that's in the starts to move up the elevator level. So the important thing is that you get your mood high and you go in with the right framework, because you got to realize this: you cast a shadow. I remember if I walked into Yum Brands and I had my head down and I was kind of frowning, people would look at me like, "Oh my God, what's wrong? What's going on in the company?" I cast a shadow. And, it's amazing how if you're smiling, other people will smile. If you have energy, other people will have energy. People follow the leader. and the leader casts a shadow. So you need to get yourself casting the shadow that you want, that you know is going to create well-being for yourself and well-being for others. Now, this is so important that I have written a book, and Robin mentioned it, that's going to come out in February. It's called Take Charge of You: How Self-Coaching Can Transform Your Life and Career. And it's the important thing is asking yourself the questions that allows you to figure out what really creates joy in your life. What are those joy builders? What are the things that destruct joy? Tear joy down. How do you really, pursue joy? How you know yourself and appreciate what you're all about, so that you can, keep working on yourself so that you can be the best you can be, and enjoy your life and work and get things in balance. And we try to help people to coach themselves in this book, because what we found is that people are missing coaching, particularly in this virtual world. People are missing out on the coaching they need to be successful. And then in most companies, one of the biggest problems that people have is they're not getting the coaching they want. And your life and your career is way too important to delegate to someone else. So that's why, I've written this book, to help people coach themselves to success. And the great thing is once you coach yourself to success, you're able to be a better coach for others. And, Booker T. Washington said, the happiest people in the world are those who do the most for others. And that's why I'm so happy that I actually got to talk to you today, because you are making a big difference in this world. I have so much respect for educators. I have so much respect for people that are improving our healthcare system. I have so much respect for the students who are going to go out and make our world a better place. And, being able to talk with you, has definitely been the highlight of my day. And I look forward to taking any questions that you may have. And my only regret about this talk is that I'm not there in person to see all of you. But hopefully that'll be happening someday soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Some really great, insightful, and practical strategies on this topic of respect in the workplace and how it contributes to employee well-being. So as you mentioned, we're going to transition now to a time of Q&A. So David, I'll let you catch your breath for a second and introduce myself. But I did want to note that we got a comment from someone in the chat that they love Crystal Pepsi. They loved it. So don't feel too bad.
That's good, because we actually, Pepsi actually brought it back as a in-and-out product last year. So it's a really good idea. It was just poorly executed when I did it.
That's great. Well, thanks for your humility and sharing those stories. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Brandon Butcher, and I serve as the Associate Director for the Novak Leadership Institute and Instructor of Strategic Communication at the university's School of Journalism, the J School. Some of you out there might be J School grads. But that's where our Leadership Institute is housed. And I get to work alongside David, link arms in our mission to develop future leaders who will make a positive impact in their careers and communities. And it has been a lot of fun. So I'll be moderating our Q&A and fielding questions from our live audience. And I'll just remind everyone watching that you can submit questions via the Q&A window to the right of your video player. If you've been using the chat, it's just beneath that icon. Or just a quick reminder there. So we'll have about 20 minutes, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And we're looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts. So David, as you know, we have a variety of audiences attending this session. Our partners at MU Extension and Engagement, of course. Thanks again to Marshall Stewart for having us participate. We've got business and nonprofit leaders. And then we've got the University of Missouri community, our faculty and staff, and obviously our many students and recent grads who are also watching this session. And I wanted to start there, David. You've spent a lot of time with our Mizzou students at the Institute, and I'm wondering how you think these ideas of respect and well-being in the workplace might specifically apply to them. What advice do you have for these soon-to-be graduates and recent grads as they just get started in their careers?
Well, I think that the four things that we just talked about are something you need to do day one when you go into any new job. Respecting other people, being empathetic to what other people are going through, asking questions. What would you do if you were me? Recognizing people just by saying thank you if they help you out. Not everybody has to give away a floppy chicken day one, but it does. Thank you is a very powerful word. Start using it the minute you start, going into the workplace, and be clear with your communication. Be clear about what you need and be clear about what you think can be done. And I always think don't underestimate the power of the impact that you can have when you come into a new job. And so be courageous and speak up and show people you're there because you want to make a difference.
That's great. I did collect a few questions from students in our classes to share with you in advance. And one student asked, how do I go about gaining respect from those in my company, especially when I'm someone at a lower level, like an intern or entry-level employee?
Yeah. Well, yesterday, my daughter Ashley and we did a podcast with Indra Nui, who just wrote a book called My Life in Full. Okay, and she said something that was very, very powerful. Is that talent matters? Doesn't matter if you're a female, doesn't matter if you're a male, doesn't matter what color you are. In the end, talent will be elevated. Okay, so the first way to gain respect is to do your job. Do your job and perform. Okay, if you do your job well, that'll give you respect, especially if you do it in a way that is respectful of others. Okay, you combine those two things, and you're going to be on your way. You're going to never get a whole lot of respect if you're not doing your job fantastically well.
I love that. And one student had a similar question. They're asking whether or not earning respect is different than earning trust in the workplace. Are those different things? Do you think there's a difference between building your credibility, earning trust versus earning respect?
Well, in both cases, you're using the earning trust, earning respectability. I think those are linked. Okay, because you're trying to earn something. There's another thing you can do is do. Respecting others is not earning it. It's just it's how you treat other people. It's the context that you put those words in. But I think if you earn trust and earn respect, those things are together. You're not going to earn trust if you don't earn respect. And I think those two are linked. So one of the things that's really important, and Stephen Covey said that when he met with all the students at the University of Missouri, is that you need to extend trust. I believe it's very important to trust in positive intentions. Too many people go to work thinking about the 1% of people that are going to, mess things up versus thinking about the 99.9% of the people who are going to do things right. Okay. If you kind of trust in positive intentions, people will trust you. I've never trusted anybody that didn't trust me. Have you?
No. Yeah. No, that's great. And I love that idea of respect being something that's owed to everyone, and the difference there between earning that. There's a question here about, again, from our students, if you've ever worked in an environment that did not foster respect, and what was that situation like, if so, and how did you work to improve the toxic culture or toxic environment?
I'm really pleased to say that I've been in very, very positive environments. Okay, I've been in environments which were much more individually oriented versus team oriented. Okay, which I didn't like as well. I'm more of a team builder, a collaborator. And that's tougher. But I was working up in the same company as I was a part of PepsiCo, and the biggest thing that I always try to do was make a difference with the team that I could make a difference on, whether I was a team member or the team leader. Okay. And because you can pretty much, you can impact the environment that you control. You can't control everything else, okay? But the environment that you're in, that you work in as a team member, as a leader, you can make a real positive impact on that. And I think by and large, people will respect that, and they're not going to want a toxic environment. But the fact of the matter is, there are way too many toxic environments, or you wouldn't have a situation where 82% of people don't feel they're recognized by their boss. Okay, it's a big problem. It's why my mission in life, is to create is to get rid of the toxic leaders, get rid of the bad bosses. You cannot believe, the numbers say that like 45% of people would take less money if they could just have a different boss. Okay, and so my advice with people is if you're talented and you're doing your job and you're doing a great job and you're in a vocation that you really like, okay, you are needed. You are in demand. Okay, so I would encourage you to not work in a toxic environment for too long.
That's great. And last question here from our students. Along those same lines, what if you do have a conflict with your boss or supervisor, or disagreement, or you've got a difficult boss? How do you address that? What's the best way to address that while also still being respectful of that person in authority or in that position?
Right. Well, this is where I think you have to be empathetic. This is where you have to use some of that Novak Leadership Institute training. Okay. Yeah, what perceptions, habits, beliefs does your boss have? Why does he have this, or why does she have this feeling? And what's the source of the conflict? So I always think the best way to get to resolution on that is to sit down with that person and say, I understand why you feel the way you do, or at least I think I do, okay? But am I missing something here? Can you explain it to me? Okay, and then use that, but take the high ground by rounding up on your superior. Okay, there's only one person that usually wins if you get into a fight with somebody, with your boss, and it's your boss. Okay, so use some good people skills. Okay, take the high ground. Ask questions that promote insight. Okay. Show respect in the way how you bring forward the disagreements that you may have. Okay, and then I find generally most bosses will turn into coaches.
That's great. So let's zoom out again for a minute and take it back to today's topic of cultivating respect for well-being, especially during times of uncertainty. And David, you mentioned your podcast, How Leaders Lead. And in that podcast, you've interviewed dozens of high-impact leaders who have had to navigate their way through this recent pandemic. Could you share any lessons you learned from them when it comes to the role of cultivating an environment of respect and recognition, and how valuable that might have been through this difficult chapter?
Well, I think one thing is that a lot of the CEOs that I've talked to have learned more about the importance of family balance, because they're at home more, and they've been able to accomplish a lot of what they used to accomplish without being gone so much. Okay, they've become better. They've used technology to make themselves more efficient. I talked to the CEO of Target, Brian Cornell. Since in the last 3 years, he's only been in their headquarters building, I think, 4 times. Okay, and but he feels like he's never been closer to the workforce because he's out in the Targets, but he also has all these Zoom calls and he's taking questions, and he feels like the company's become smaller during this time. But it's amazing how many people have realized just how wonderful it is to be able to do your job and spend more time with your family.
Mm.
So it's finding that right balance that I think is going to be the key going forward. And I think people have a higher appreciation for that today than they would have had before COVID.
Do you have any advice or suggestions for those organizations that are still remote or might have a hybrid work environment for how they can cultivate these environments of respect, even if they're working remotely or virtually?
Well, I think when you do that, the communication becomes key. You have to find a way to communicate, okay? And, I think you have to, that's a big part of the respect. You have to find a way to get people's input. So you have to have chat sessions where you bring people in and say, this is what we're working on. I need everybody's ideas. And, you have to, work hard at showing people that you need them. Okay. And you do that by putting the effort in and putting the process in that's going to make sure that you get their involvement. And it's harder virtually. Okay. But a lot of people are learning how to do it just by planning it. One of the things that, I talked about culture being important. One of the other things that was important for all the great companies that I've talked to is they put process and discipline around what really matters. Okay. So if respect and well-being really matters, you got to put process and discipline around it. What are the things that you're going to do as a leader, as a person, as a team member to make sure that's going to be paramount as you go forward? Things do not happen by accident. People talk about diversity. Well, who makes progress in diversity? Well, the people who actually do something. They don't talk about it. The leader actually spends time on it. Okay? The leader gets a chief diversity officer who actually promotes diversity, knows how to make it happen within the organization. It's not just a job. It's a job that's held by somebody who really can make things happen. So it's putting things in action. That's the key thing.
That's great. And one more question from our audience here. From time to time, there may be employees or team members who are resistant to practicing some of these principles. What strategies or advice do you have for winning over people who may not be fully bought in?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I think you have to trust in positive intentions. You got to know that maybe this person doesn't know what he or she doesn't know. Okay. Make them aware that they are really, missing the boat here. They're not living the environment that you want to have with your team. Okay. And you coach. So you really coach and you tell them that, make them self-aware. Okay. Then if it doesn't, they continue to be the person that nobody wants to see in the room. Okay. Mm-hmm. The person that seems to deflate everybody, zap everybody, then you hit them with a 2x4 and say, I don't think you really heard me, okay? Because you haven't changed one iota, okay? Yeah. If you really want to work around here, you better make some changes, okay? And then if they don't make changes, then they don't get the privilege to work on your team. You can't have people destroy the morale of the rest of your people, okay? You got to hold people accountable. If you don't, when you don't hold people accountable, then it really upsets the apple cart. There's nothing worse than really busting your tail, doing a great job every day, and somebody isn't doing that, isn't carrying their weight, and in fact is bringing the rest of the team down. That's demoralizing. And if a leader lets that happen for very long, there's a real problem. But I always believed in direct confrontation. Hey, do you realize you just did this, Sally? Do you realize you just did this, Bill? You can't. This is not what we're talking about here. This is not collaboration. This is not believing in all people. And how do you see it? Do you see it different than me? Am I missing something? No, I'm not missing. You're probably right. Well, okay, then let's not have that happen anymore. That usually works. Okay?
Yeah, that would work with me. So let's turn it, the microscope back on ourselves. And I love how you've always had this level of personal accountability for leaders, and you've recommended the book, a short book called Walk the Talk, to our students. That's all about leaders practicing what they preach. And So talk to us a little bit about the role that individual leaders have in modeling these kinds of behaviors and setting that tone.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about with the shadow of the leader. People do what the leader does, okay? I love the Walk the Talk book because there's one line in there which I particularly love, which is, you judge yourself by your intentions, but people judge you by your actions, okay? And this Walk the Talk's about this janitor, okay, who's listening to this new president comes in to make a speech. He's practicing the speech before he's going to give the next day. And the janitor drops his keys on the floor, okay? And the president hears those keys and he says, "Oh, you've been listening to my speech. What did you think of it?" The janitor says, "Well, I've heard it before." Okay? And the whole process of the book is this new president, Bill Elby, going through the process of realizing how important it is for him to truly walk the talk. And his speech is 1,000 times better at the end of the book. But again, he goes through the process of respect, empathy, recognizing the value of others, and then learns how to communicate. So I think it's a great book that I highly recommend to everybody to read. I also like it because it's small. It's a short little book, and you can say you've read a book recently.
I love it. Okay, last question. So I know you mentioned your new book coming out in February called Take Charge of You, and how self-coaching can transform your life and career. And I'll mention, we don't mention that to promote it. All the proceeds go to charity. And
the University of Missouri, by the way, because we're going to help fund research and all that. So yeah,
that's right, and into our community. So so let's end there. Can you tell us a little bit about how these principles of respect and recognition apply to, self-management, leading ourselves, especially when it comes to promoting personal well-being?
Yeah, well, I think self-coaching is all about respecting what you're capable of, understanding what drives your joy, asking yourself some key questions, recognizing what values matter most to you, okay? And so I think a lot of these things are just kind of reversed and moved inward, okay? But if you don't learn to coach yourself, you're never going to be a great coach of other people. It's interesting, the best leaders I've talked to, they find ways of building self-awareness. They're really good at building self-awareness, knowing themselves, growing themselves, figuring out what's next. Yeah, they go get advice, but they're smart enough to figure out what advice they need, okay? And what this book really does is helps people work through the process. I don't mind promoting this at all, because I think everybody's listening to this should buy the book, okay? Because there's no doubt in my mind that it's going to make you a better leader. That's why we wrote the book. People pay thousands of dollars for coaching, and this is, the best value in the history of the world, okay? Because this is, your own life is too important to delegate to other people. You need to control that, okay? And do whatever you can to become, to achieve what you're capable of achieving. And you can't turn that over to other people. So I'm unabashedly selling this book. I'm doing video text messages to every CEO I know, which is a lot of them. Okay. I'm telling everybody, because I think that if we can get people to become better coaches, the world's going to become a better place. And I think this is one way that you can do it. Okay. The other thing that I'm really doing now, and I'll put my pitch in here. Everybody in this call should subscribe to the How Leaders Lead podcast with David Novak, because why wouldn't you want to learn from the best CEOs in the world? I just did one with Dan Cathy from Chick-fil-A. Okay. I'm posting one tomorrow with Jessica Kim, who just started a new company called Ionicare, which is for caregivers. Next week I've got Indra Nui talking about family life balance. I've got podcasts with Tom Brady, Jack Nicklaus. I've got the who's who list of CEOs. Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase. And it's right there. And, I always used to do best practice visits. I go visit these people and learn from them. My goal is to bring you a best practice visit. And my podcasts are absolutely free. So, I don't need you to listen to my podcast, okay? But I think that anybody that's curious and wants to get better should, okay? I feel the same way about the book. But if I didn't like it, I guess there'd be something wrong with it, right?
True. Well, we're certainly proponents and champions of the idea of avid learning. So, I encourage.
That's my next book. My next book is going to be called "Learn Your Way to Success."
Love it.
Okay, it's going to be a series of 30 essays on things that I've learned, and stories that I've learned and picked up from other people, et cetera, et cetera. But this is what I do now. I'm trying to be an educator in my own way too. Maybe my journalism background is coming into play.
Love it. Love it. Well, David, this has been a ton of fun, and I'm sure we could do this for hours. But we'll just thank you once again for taking the time to share your insights and experience, and you've provided some extremely practical and valuable lessons to apply to our own leadership contexts and to improve our organization. So thanks again.
Well, thank you very much, Brandon. I appreciate everything you're doing for Novak Leadership Institute, Margaret, the whole team. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I apologize for going on. I think I went on a little longer than I'm supposed to, but I kind of got carried away. So that happens. Okay, I apologize for that.
We love the energy. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Vice Chancellor Stewart to close us out for the day.
Well, thank you, Brandon. It's been good to have you with us on the set, and always good to have David Novak. I mean, what a pleasure it is to listen to him. I know I got to know him when you guys brought him first to campus and you were setting up the Novak Institute and got introduced then, and then several other visits. He's been here a couple more times that I've been involved in, and what a remarkable leader. And I am one of those people that he talked about that listens to the podcast. So I can vouch for it. It is free. As some of you that know me know that I do a lot of walking every day. I got a lot of miles in, and that's one of the things I do is listen to this podcast when he comes up with new ones. And there are some great ones out there, and it's a diverse group of leaders. One of the things that I find really good about what David's doing is it's the breadth of leadership. Women, men, people in large companies, small companies, people that really, and I think to cover the landscape, and one of the things he talked about there was the idea of family. And you're hearing many of these leaders, as he talks to them, talk about family now. And so I think that is something that's really beginning to rise up. I want to recap just a couple things he said. He talked about respect, empathy, communication, recognition, 4 principles. And I think it's important for us to think about not only how we apply those organizationally, as the head of Extension or the head of a university or the head of whatever we may be, but how do you do that in your life? Because if you think about it, you can drop that right down into your family unit, into your community, into any social setting, any kind of service organization you're in. Those principles are very relevant and very real. And just think about how our world would be if people had more respect, empathy, communication, and better recognition for one another. Just think about what that means for society. So I think it's important that we think about those kind of things, that we embed those in our lives. And one of the things he said, I was jotting some notes here on a card, and one of the things he said in one of his responses to one of your questions was, you need to discover what drives your joy. And I think that was probably, for me, the takeaway of the day. Because I think if you figure that out, then you will have more respect, more empathy, more communication, better communication, and show recognition in a more appreciative way. So I want to say again, thank you to David Novak for all that you guys do with the Novak Leadership Center. I also want to thank Robin Whitaker, who was with us earlier and had the opportunity to introduce and have a little bit of a chat with her. What a remarkable leader, someone that certainly cares deeply and I know is heavily invested in the university, but all things Missouri. She is really true Missourian in every sense of the word. I also want to thank some other colleagues that Brandon has, and they're actually in the studio with us. We're glad to have Margaret Duffy, who serves as not only Professor of Strategic Communication in the School of Journalism, but also the Institute's Executive Director, and the person who really, I think, probably, if the truth be known, was the one that crystallized the idea of bringing it here and working with David in that realm. We're also glad that Katie Terry is here and a part of the Institute's Outreach Director. These are great partners that we work with in Extension. They've done a lot of stuff. I know recently they did a certification program. A lot of our employees were involved in that, a lot of our faculty and staff. So again, some wonderful discussions, some wonderful things that we can, again, apply to ourselves personally and yes, organizationally in our office settings or wherever we may be. I want you to think about all you learned today. I want you to think about the sessions you've been involved in, the different perspectives, the diversity of thought leaders that you've had, because that's what we've tried to bring you is diverse thought, which brings you different contributions from different perspectives and then allows you to crystallize that and think about what you believe to be the way to go forward as we think about personal well-being, health, wellness, and the areas that we're focused on this week. You know, we've talked a lot about Missouri's healthcare rankings, which we're not really proud of. We rank around 38th, right now, 40th in some categories. Not really where you want to be, because number one's where you want to be, and when you're in that 40, that's not the neighborhood you want to be in. And what we're committed to with the University of Missouri and all of our partners is moving that up at least to be at the midpoint. We want to be 25th or better over the next decade, and that's what we're pushing for and trying to achieve. But it's not about a number. I want to say that. It's not about a number. It's not about a percentage point. It's about saving lives, improving health, so that people can have the kind of lives they want to have. Now tomorrow, we're going to be joined again at 8:30. We'll be kicking this thing off. We're going to be joined by the University of Missouri System President, also Chancellor of University of Missouri here, a very familiar face. Dr. Moon Choi will be with us tomorrow. We'll be talking about a lot of good things going on in Extension. We'll be talking about awards, a lot of recognition, sharing some of the things that we're learning and what we're going to be doing next as we talk about Extension engagement. And I think you'll find it to be interesting to see where we launched from in 2016 and 17, what we're doing today, fulfill the promises that we made then, and we'll continue to do that as we go forward. So again, I want you to think about the learnings that are going on, the way we're trying to work together, not only internally but externally with our partners as we move forward to serve all Missourians. Thank you. Look forward to having you with us tomorrow.